Being a creative in today's world sometimes feels different than being yourself. With the constant teachings of videos showing you how to beat the algorithm or what steps you should be taking in your creative process, sometimes we forget to remember why we decided to pursue creativity in the first place. Your creative identity is the most important part of ensuring you are creating for the right reasons. And on today's episode, I had the pleasure of talking to a longtime friend, director, writer, actor, and musician, Niyah Hill. We talk about exactly how she began to find her creative identity, her research process, and much, much more. So join me in conversation with Niyah Hill, only on the Procrastination Radio Show. All right. Let me minimize myself. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Procrastination Radio Show. I'm your host, Ian Complex, and today we have a very special guest. I want you to introduce yourself now because you've been on the show already one time, but now I feel like so much has changed, and I want you to
I know.
I feel like I want you to list off everything that you have done in that time because it's just amazing to see as somebody who has got to see you just kind of go through all of it. It's been really inspiring. So who sits in front of me today?
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Niyah Hill. I don't have that much hair anymore than last time. I am a multi-hyphenate artist. My main jam is acting, but I also like to paint and write and sing a little here and there. I own a production company called Fifth Floor Studios where we tell Black stories for us, by us. We've been doing a lot of collectives and workshops, which has been really nice. And then I also now have a nonprofit theater company, 501c3, if anyone wants to donate. And we're putting up Shakespeare's 12th Night, but it's set in the 70s. The majority of the cast is people of color, and we're very young and we're trying to bring new audiences into the theater space because the theater space tends to be very white and old. I think that's about it.
But yeah, I brought you back on because we're having conversation today outside of the show just because my interest was piqued recently with just watching a lot of acting stuff, watching a lot of movies recently, most recently, Challengers and Monkey Man. And I felt such an urge to get back into a lot of these crafts. If the audience doesn't know, I started out studying screenwriting and kind of found my way into where I'm at now. But I felt so inspired that I wanted to ask somebody who's currently in that field and excelling in the field. And I just wanted to pick your brain on a few things surrounding the idea of kind of finding your personal spot or identity inside of creativity. And I wanted to ask you, as somebody who is constantly outside of the work you're doing with your own production company, when you have to audition for something and you want to make the character stand out, do you feel, or rather, what in your research connects back to kind of who you are inside of that character?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, usually when I do get an audition or a callback, it's usually for something that somebody already sees inside of me or they think they do, based just off of my outside persona, which is interesting. Because oh, you think this is me? Okay, that's a job. But what I like to do, I like to read the script multiple times. Um, it depends. Sometimes I do like to start with myself and how I relate to the character. But if I'm very different, then I like to go, what is totally outside of me? What have I not experienced? What does that feeling feel like? How would it feel like to be this character in these shoes? Um, but overall, I just try and be as natural and as me, putting myself of how I would interpret the character, because it is my interpretation, as much as possible, because you're competing with so many other actors, but it's you're not really competing because you're just being yourself and nobody out there is you, so just give them your art. And that's how I've been getting through most of my auditions, and not taking things personally, because a lot of times
Mm,
the reason why people are cast has nothing to do with talent. Like that's 0.5% of it. It's
mm-hmm.
your height. Will you fit the
Interesting.
costume if they already have it?
Yeah,
What will you look like with the other character? Yeah, it does not have anything to do with your talent most of the time.
that's so interesting. Um, because again, it's like a situation where you're jumping into something, giving it your all without the expectation of return,
Yeah.
or like that. It feels like almost unnatural because it feels like you're. I don't know. I feel like there's nothing. The auditioning process, I guess for like musicians, it might be a similar thing for like
Hmm.
playing spots or personally, I can say for myself, I haven't had any experience in any situation where I feel like I've had to audition in a way. I guess like maybe submitting portfolios for a job, but in a very similar way, I think with design, I've come to a place where the specific niche of designing for businesses comes with a lot of separation of self in a way where it's like you kind of have to subscribe to a lot of the trends or
The trend.
colors or
Yeah.
shapes that are in
Mhm.
because people are looking for that. They're not necessarily they're looking for your skill, but they're maybe not looking for like the tinge of yourself that you might bring to a specific project, which almost feels like the opposite for acting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong with that. Like,
I mean, like it depends. It
yeah,
depends. Say for instance, if I got an audition and it's the CW or
yeah,
some network like that, you do kind of have to change your style of how you approach it. You should like, watch some CW shows. What is the acting like? Is it hyper realism? Like, to try and like match
right,
the tone because I feel like every network has a tone. Now with, all these like Netflix, HBO, some of it is kind of
yeah,
over the place, but we know HBO is gonna be more like raw, real,
right,
a little more rated R sometimes. So you could go off of that where I feel like you have
mm-hmm,
to kind of mold yourself to certain things, but it honestly just depends. For me, I'm always just gonna give me. I know that's not everybody
yeah,
though. And by me, I just mean how I feel it should be, not necessarily Kennedy, like Kennedy in this role,
mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm,
how Kennedy
mm,
sees this role.
right, right, because that is another aspect of it because you're not ever playing yourself.
No. Sometimes you are. I feel like that's harder.
What do you mean? Like if you find a role that's like super specific to you?
But what I mean, at least for me, that it's harder when it is the character is very much like me. For instance, I'm playing Viola in our production of Twelfth Night. And if you've ever seen She's the Man, it's basically that story,
Mm-hmm,
this girl, she ends up in this new town and her brother, she thinks, well, they changed it a little in the movie, but in the play, like her brother, she thinks her brother's dead. And so to disguise herself so people won't know that she's, very wealthy and a woman in this new area, she dresses up as a boy. But in our version, we're taking it, from the 70s where maybe this Violet character has been into being more gender fluid and like maybe this is her first opportunity to be someone that she's not where
interesting.
she is in her normal life, right?
Yeah,
And so I'm, doing all my character work, yada yada, and my friend Audrey, who's directing, goes, Kennedy, I think that you don't understand that this character is closer to you than you think. And I was like, oh, I hate to hear that because it just basically means that I'm, blocking myself off from
right,
something in it
right,
because I'm
right.
trying not to, go that deep or
Yeah,
I'm just probably nervous too.
yeah,
And so I've just had to learn, like, especially with Shakespeare, I feel like it's hard because everyone thinks it's supposed to be this one way and sound this one way. And even me talking like this, she's like,
yeah,
yes, talk like that. And I'm like, like it
Interesting.
just feels wrong, but I know
Yeah.
that I need to speak from this voice because the character is me,
Yeah.
especially this character who like is diving into being like gender fluid and like is probably bi and like
Right.
probably having questions of her sexuality and like who she likes. And it's like, well, that's literally me right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
That's
do think
super.
it's hard.
Yeah. That's super interesting because I feel like in that it does seem like you said to toe the line between like okay, where do I sit with this? And I wonder if you like when you're writing, is
Hmm.
it that same kind of line where like I don't want to put my entire self into this unless the
No.
story calls for it, or you're just like
In the writing, I'm putting all of me out there. But
yeah,
I don't know, there's some safety that I feel in writing where I
yeah,
can just be extremely myself.
mm-hmm,
Um and I think it's just a different technique. Like with acting, the technique is, you want to make sure you're acting, but this isn't your therapy. Like you're acting, but you could go
mm,
back to being Kennedy. But
yeah,
when I'm writing, most of the time it's about something that I've experienced or from my life. So
right,
I don't really need to, I guess, block any of that. It does feel
yeah.
more therapeutic to me.
In a similar way for music, like I recently put out a few songs that I had just kind of
I know. I
holding hostage
Yeah.
in for a long time, and
Very
I
long.
think very no, yeah, because you were there,
Because
you were
I've
in
heard
those.
some of it. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. You were I looked when I was like remixing them and I looked at the comments and you were there asking for the lyrics. I found that really funny. But yeah, some of them like 2, 3 years old. Um and I realized that I didn't put them out because they felt too personal. And I think in re-listening to them now, I'm like, okay, I've moved on so far past those situations and those
Yeah,
times that I can do that.
you
But I
can do
think
that.
it's it's difficult I guess to find that and because that could be a part of my voice to be able to
Mhm.
speak to something in the time, but also I don't think, however old I was then, I could have like that when I'm in that situation. That's the only thing I'm seeing, and
Right,
so
I agree. With writing, like,
yeah,
you can't write something you're dealing with. I mean, you
exactly.
can, but
Yeah,
it's
you can't.
probably not that good.
Right, right, right,
You're
right,
still dealing with it, you're still going through it.
right. Yeah, and it's weird to again like because this has to do a lot with my struggle with voice, and I think my struggle with identity as a creative. And I think for me, hearing what you're saying about acting, it's funny that I think I became much more proficient when I think parts of myself were taken out of the equation
Mhm,
as far as like design or production or whatever I was going into. I think when it was like I'm doing this for somebody else, I think it became a lot easier to act in service instead of like giving myself the service of like y- let's get this out of you.
mhm.
And it's kind of like it's really funny seeing people attach themselves to like older versions of you in certain things. Like I'm
Yes.
sure people have like because of the internet, people have watched the stuff you've put out and maybe have said things like, "Oh my goodness, I resonate with this now." So I guess
Mhm.
how do you look back on pieces of your past voice in this new person you are now, and like how do you feel when you see those things?
It's hard, especially I'm a Scorpio,
Mm,
and we are just known to continuously die and, like, rebirth ourselves
yeah, yeah,
so
which is
many times.
amazing.
It is, it's very fun,
Yeah,
but also very confusing,
yeah,
especially, we're in our 20s, like, you change so much, and that's okay. Like, I think for me, how I've been getting through that is just telling myself it's really okay to not like this one thing and, like, make it your whole personality
hmm
anymore, and, like, it's okay that other people are not gonna understand that, or they think you're old you, and with my artwork, I'm very endeared by that, like, if somebody resonates with something, even if it's old, because 'cause I'm like, "Yeah, I was there at that one point." I don't feel that way anymore, but, like,
yeah,
it is cool, and you still remember. who you were and how
Mhm.
you felt. So it's still nice. For things, I guess, like if I wrote something and it was kind of a harder experience or like more traumatizing, I guess. I mean, that hasn't happened to me where somebody's like, I've resonated with this so hard. Well, that's not true. That is
Mm.
not true.
So
Looking back.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
in those instances, I feel much more prepared to speak to people because
yeah.
I've probably moved on from those situations to be like, you
Right.
know what? Life gets better. When I made this, I didn't think that, but like now I do. And now we can have a deeper conversation about that.
What you were saying reminded me of like stepping into different pieces. Like you said, we're in the grand scheme of life, we're so young on the
Very.
timeline,
Yeah.
and I think especially this year has been a really transformative year for just my personality. And
Hmm.
I think for whatever reason, this year I think understanding what I had patience for was a really big thing. And I think learning to or honing in on the power of like speaking up for myself became something that I had to tap into a lot. And
Mm,
then I think I got in my head because it felt like I was just being this person who was just saying no to everything all of a sudden
mm,
and was being super not negative but just kind of like, "Mm, I don't think so, don't like that." And then kind of not knowing where to navigate when I get there. So I guess my question for you is like, as you've changed, has tapping into certain emotions been harder, or has it presented itself in a different way, when you're acting, when you're writing, when you're collaborating with people? Um, like every time you change, like you said, do you have to then relearn how to cry on command, or do whatever?
oh, for acting?
When I said that, I didn't. It sounded like I was saying it like it was a trick, like it's not like
No,
a
no, it's
super
not. No, I
intense
totally understand
method.
what you're
Yeah.
saying. It is. I mean, even with acting, I think it was Emma Stone
Mm,
who was doing this interview, and she was talking about how there's never a time where she's on the set and she feels that she is doing everything right and that
mm,
she hit the mark
yeah.
and that she remembers how to act. Like sometimes it does feel that
Mm-hmm.
way because you are changing so much as a person that you sometimes are more connected to certain things and then like less connected to roles that you might have done in the past. Like it might be harder for you to connect to like love. Like I don't know, right now for
Yeah.
me I'm like why is it so hard for me to connect to this like girl
Yeah.
having a crush on these people?
Yeah.
And I can look at my life and be like, well, when's the last time I felt like that? Maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
not focused on that right now. It is kind of
Yeah.
hard to connect to those feelings. But I think that's where like living a life comes
Mm.
in. To be
Mm-hmm.
an actor,
Mm-hmm.
you have to live a life. And then also craft. Like even
Mm.
if you feel like you lost it or you're like rusty, you never really do. You just got to
Yeah.
go back to like stop trying to make yourself cry. Stop trying to make yourself feel this
Mm.
thing and like take in the information that's there that'll help
Yeah.
you already and like use
Yeah.
your toolbox. Use the things that you learned in school or in this class and like your breath because it
Right.
is I think a lot of times acting is even for me, like when I first started school, like it was seen as this magical thing that just
Mm-hmm.
happens in the moment and then you feel it all the time, but you
Right.
don't sometimes, or sometimes it's hard to get there.
Yeah.
But when you have like a breath support and like breath
Mm-hmm.
work, or you're like, these are my circumstances, like my brother's dead, I'm in this new
Mm.
town, and I want to not be a girl right now, move forward from that. Um, that's kind of what helps me. And then it's also, I think it's really cool for people who have played certain characters at one point in their life and
Mm-hmm.
then played the same character again at a different
Later.
point in their life.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's just, it's gonna be so different, but it's probably
Yeah.
gonna be so much juicier because you just lived
Yeah.
more and you've learned so much more, and you're
Yeah.
probably looking back like, "Oh, why did I ever make that choice?" Like, I
Right.
this is what somebody would do if they were in love or if they wanted revenge,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's I was listening to this James Taylor song
Mhm,
called I Don't Want to Be Lonely Tonight. And it's such a beautifully like haunting song because
mhm.
from my interpretation it's basically somebody just being like, let me do whatever I can to not have to feel the emptiness of being alone. So like you can like treat me however you want. You could he
God.
literally says like do me wrong, do me right now. I don't care. Like I just don't want to be lonely tonight. So it's like
Oh my god, send me this
listening to
song.
that. No, I will definitely send you a song. But today in looking it up, I found there was like an Isley Brothers cover of it.
Mhm.
And I'm
Oh,
listening to it. I'm like, this is a totally different
different song.
vibe. Like it's the same message, but it's a different vibe. And then
Yeah.
I'm like looking up him covering it live and it feels different. I think that's like you said, really beautiful
It
because you're getting to
is.
see somebody at so many different places. And I feel like even in like the release of the recent songs, again, like I so badly wanted to just re-record them. But then a part of me was like, and other people were telling me there was like put it out. But a part of me was like, I want to like recontextualize this music for where I'm at right now. But I think
Mhm,
for a lot of very obvious reasons, I'm just not like I said, I'm not connected to that. And I don't think it would have been the best reflection of what was there. I don't think the emotion would have played the same. I don't think I could have recreated the production because I was just in a different place where things sounded better to me a certain way.
mhm,
And it's it's so it's so interesting the thought of getting to live with your work for that long because even that time from then to now feels like such a stretch.
mhm.
um and it's so interesting, and I don't want to know if like if there's anybody that you've played before that you would want to revisit like now.
Mm. Anyone that I've played before that I want to revisit? Um, the two that I did at USC, one I played God, which
Oh,
big shoes to fill, and the other show I was playing this character named Christine
yeah.
in this show called Nora A Doll's House, but it was a different version than the normal A Doll's House, and there was
Okay.
like three different time periods, and I
Yeah.
was set in the 60s. People are always wanting me to be in the 60s, 70s. Like, I'm not mad at it. I just noticed that.
Yeah.
But with the God one,
Mhm.
um, I'd want to go back to that because I was just in a very different part of my life then. I had actually
Yeah.
gotten into, like, my freak accident with my teeth
Right,
at
right,
the
right.
time of the show, so I feel like I was so focused on enunciating and, like,
Mm,
not freaking, like, messing up because of
yeah.
that, and it was still a really good show, and I felt the most confident doing that show, but I'd wanna go back to that
Interesting.
just
Yeah.
because you could play God so many ways,
Yeah.
and I was definitely a jokester, but I wanna know what it would be like to put more love into
Yeah.
it and more hurt because this, depiction of God was really hurt by everybody, like, that's what the show is called, Everybody, and, like, how everybody treats one another and treats God and treats the planet. It's really good show by a Black playwright. And then the other show, Nora, I wanna go back to that because
Mhm.
I was so freaked out. It was my last college show and the first
Yeah.
college show that my entire family was coming to. Like,
Oh
I had
wow.
had, some people come here and there, but, like, my whole family
Yeah.
was coming because it was, like, my last show, and in the show, I'm playing this woman who is in love with her best friend, who's a girl, and I was so freaked out because I was like, "Oh my god, my family's gonna see me kiss a girl," and, like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
didn't tell them, and, like, what are they gonna think?" And I was just, like, trying so hard to make that character, like, not me, even though, like, the
Yeah.
circumstances were literally, like, I hadn't
Right.
come out to my family and
Yeah.
all this stuff yet. And man, I would just wanna do that without the pressure of what I put on myself because I genuinely didn't give a fuck. And they also were, like, so impressed and so
Yeah.
proud of me, and
That's
I
cool.
didn't allow that to affect me.
Yeah. That's really cool. I kind of want to nerd out a little bit with you if you will
Mhm.
allow me on your process of like researching and studying a character.
Mhm.
Um because recently I was told that I love lore. I love a history.
I
I
love
love getting
war.
into the context of everything.
Mm.
And I want to know for you if you were to kind of like look at all of the projects that you've researched for, do you have a
Mhm.
typical process? And if you do, like how long and how granular do you get? Because I feel like sometimes you can do too much research and then the research is what's showing. And it's like you haven't
Mhm.
even like lived in the character or put yourself inside of there. So I would want to know
Yeah.
what like a typical study looks like for you.
I do a lot of research. For me,
Yeah.
I feel like even up to the day that we're either performing the show or I'm shooting, I'm still doing research. Like, it just never stops. It's a never-ending process. It's never the same process. It really does depend on the character of what I'll start with, but I'll probably hit every single mark. So, in the show that I'm in right now, right? A lot of historical context because it's Shakespeare, one, and then it's set in the 70s at a time where there was a lot going on in the world, right? So I you got, like, all of that historical background that I'm doing, but then also, we're setting this at a time where, like, this character Viola is really, you know, struggling with her gender identity and gender performance. And at the time, in this time of the 70s was like the new start of drag and then
Hmm.
going into like ball culture. And
Yeah.
so just studying that progression, what it was like.
Mm.
And if I were to go to a ball at this time, like, people probably wouldn't think I was like real or like, like, how would
Interesting.
people
Yeah.
treat me? Like, would I get,
Yeah.
a little poked fun of, like bullied? And I started rewatching The Get Down. It's not the exact same time period, but it's around that
Yeah.
time, and I was just
Close,
like,
close.
wow,
Yeah.
this show is literally perfect because it's got
Yeah.
like the disco and like disco going into rap and like
Right.
all of these dualities with the music. Um, I love to just ask questions, and you'll usually get those questions answered if you just keep rereading the work. Like, sometimes I feel that people don't like to keep rereading, but if you do, like, you're a writer, like, you don't just put things in there just because. Everything is intentional.
Right.
So everything has a meaning of why it's in there, why this person
Right.
is this age and why this time, and this location. And so I just go back and I'm like, okay, well, what is my name? Who am I? When's my birthday? Do I have siblings? Do I have a family? What was my upbringing like? What do I like to eat? Like, what do I like to do? What do I not like? What am I afraid of people knowing about me?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of actors do this where it's like you read once for yourself, you read to hear what everyone else says about you, and then you
Mm.
read for like what you say about others. So like, how are you perceived?
Interesting.
How are other people perceiving you? How are you perceiving the world? Yeah, I be doing a lot of unnecessary stuff. And then I think one of my favorite parts about research is I love to find, we call it in school like your iconic image. You
Mm-hmm.
basically go on the internet, it takes a while to find it,
Yeah.
but you have to find like an image of a person, preferably full body,
Mm-hmm.
of somebody that you could be like, this is this character. Like, this is what
Interesting.
this character would look like if they weren't
Yeah.
me. You could get a lot
Yeah.
of information from that. Like, if I'm, looking up images from the 70s, early 70s, maybe even late 60s, and like
Mm-hmm.
seeing how people were even like posing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could you could take a lot of information from that. You could be like,
Right.
"Oh, they probably walked like this. They're, leaning to one side more. They do their hair like this." And then you
Right.
try and like wear those clothes and like
Yeah.
hit those poses. Mine right now is this disco singer named Sylvester. And never, you know Sylvester?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh
With
my
the
god, yeah.
yeah. Sorry, sorry, sorry. That's hard.
Yes. Yeah, so that's mine. And I'm just like, wow, like first of all, I'm surprised I've never heard of him
Yeah.
before this. And then like it's so incredible to hear like I know there's a little documentary on YouTube that I was watching and how he was so openly gay and like
Mhm.
taking over disco and that was just
Yeah.
unheard of. Like
Yeah.
just being so unapologetic about it. And I was like, wow,
That's
this is
cool.
my person, my iconic image. Yeah.
That's cool. So like for you as director, how do you communicate that to maybe the actors? Because then are
Yeah.
you like putting that all of that onto them? Like, hey, here's these 35 books that I read.
No, no, no.
Okay.
I mean, I never directing is really hard and it's something I don't even know for sure if I want to do
Yeah.
professionally. Like
Interesting. Interesting.
it's just a big role to fill. I commend like
Yeah.
directors, but I know that I'm good at it. That's the thing.
Yeah. Right, right.
I never want to, stomp on anybody's toes or get into their process. So I think a lot of what directing is asking questions and being okay not knowing the answers and
Yeah.
just having that conversation with the actor of, literally what you just asked me, like, how do you usually go about a role? And then I can have a vision. I could be like, yo, this is the time period that I want. These are the costumes. How are you gonna fit into this world? And I think it's good to have boundaries when you're doing art because the specificity makes everything universal. Like that's why Everything Everywhere All at Once is so good. Like because they were like, "Oh, we're not trying to make this story for everybody. We're making it specifically for this group of people. We're putting this group
Right.
of people in it. We're telling this story. And if you get it, perfect." And that's why everybody was like, I see myself in that role because we
Right.
were so specific and you weren't trying to, you know, capture everyone in this.
Yeah. That
So I think that's what I do.
you just said something so crazy. There's 2 points about that. I want to say the thing about you said this specificity makes it universal, which is a
Oh yeah.
crazy sentence. Writer. You're a writer. In case you didn't know, you're
That
a
is not
writer.
my bar. I definitely took that from.
Um, okay, well, whoever that is, kudos. But there was something you mentioned about you giving the other artists their space, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a lot of personally, a lot of I think facing people kind of vision casting for me right now, and play like towing that line of like I trust them because they are senior in some way, in some fashion, and trying to give that grace to my elders, for lack of a better word, like people who have been either creating longer or in it longer or who've seen different things. But then remembering that I've also been creating for myself and seen different things in my own way and heard different things, and trying to ensure that I'm not playing a role for somebody else in this way specifically.
Mhm.
And I think it becomes interesting again when you are either collaborating with somebody or there's like a unified vision of something. Even inside of that, everybody's going to have their own way that something might kind of pan out. And
Right.
I think ideally you would all kind of come into it hoping that maybe it's less of a this is exactly what I want kind of shot by shot, but more of a this is what I want to feel after we finish this, or this is what I want to get. Um, which is it's kind of
Totally.
hard to feel that in a visual medium like acting or
Mhm.
design uh, or video editing, because it's kind of like I have the footage. What am I gonna do with it?
Mhm.
So it's really interesting having to be able to play to all these different sides and then still try to ensure that you aren't disappearing inside of something, but in some cases for you like you want to, I don't know if disappear is the word for it, but you want to maybe like transform into a role would be better than
Mhm.
disappear.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think some people do want to disappear. I feel like a lot of times, like, if you're playing a real life person,
Mm,
you do sometimes wanna I don't even know if it's, like, disappear. I'm, like, blanking, but I, like, just recently went to this thing with Daniel Kaluuya,
yeah.
and he was talking about, Judas and the Black Messiah
Mm,
and
amazing movie.
saying fire movie, but
Yeah.
just saying that it's not an imitation, it's an interpretation
Mm,
of
mm,
it, and I think that's why him playing that character was so good because he's not trying, like, he is getting lost in it, but because he is interpreting, like, this other person's words that are not his and interpreting this life, and so by default, he is gonna disappear, and we are gonna see the person that we're supposed to be seeing. Um, but yeah, some people do wanna disappear and, like, okay, kudos to you. I don't know yet if I do wanna, like, disappear, and I feel like every role that I play usually a lot of times has to do with love, and I feel like people pick me for those roles because they see that
yeah.
in myself, so I'm never
Right.
gonna fully cover myself. It's
Yeah.
kinda hard to, but if
Right.
I were to play somebody, a real life person, I would wanna disappear a little bit.
Again, this is so funny that we're talking about this right now. I was watching Jesus Christ Superstar for the first time after I
Ooh.
saw a clip of like 9 performers singing one riff in the song differently,
Mhm.
and it just made me so curious about what it feels like stepping into that role, because some people would sing it the same way. Some
Yeah.
people would sing it totally left, and then some
Mhm.
people would just kind of like it wasn't even in their range to get to that point. So does it ever feel like you have to like take yourself all the way outside of the equation completely to get to your own place where you can then be like, I can maybe put my own mark on this after,
Mhm.
and on top of that, people are probably expecting a certain delivery of
Oh,
a
totally.
line.
I mean,
Yeah.
literally, the show that I'm doing now, like, has one of the most iconic Shakespearean monologues, right?
Yeah.
And my one thing is like, "Oh, should I watch someone else's? Should I not? I don't
Right.
know."
Right, right, right,
Um,
right.
but I think a lot of that has to just do with being okay, not being the person that people want you to be, or, like, I know this
Yeah.
the girl in One Day, like, I watched partial interview of them just talking about how she didn't feel right for the role. She didn't feel like she
Mm.
looked the part of, like, what the character was supposed to
Oh,
look like.
wow. Wow.
And I think a lot of that had to do with, like, beauty standards and
Yeah.
if people were gonna be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, she's not pretty enough to play
Right.
this role," and it's like, "No, that's not the case," like, literally F what anybody is gonna think about it because
Yeah.
you got that part for a reason, like, somebody casted you because they wanted your interpretation, not somebody else's, and so it's, like, not running from yourself at that point, and there are a lot of, like, roles that I'm like, "Oh, I would wanna do," that have been done before, and
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh," I get a little a little nervous about what people would think, but you just really can't care, and, like,
Yeah.
that's really all that it is, and you
Yeah.
are gonna care. I think telling somebody to not care and they're an actor is like a catch-22 because, like, okay, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to care, but also, like, your job literally feels like you're kind of people pleasing to
Right,
somebody and
right,
like,
right,
"Did I do it right? Like, did you
right.
like this take?" It's
Yeah.
so weird.
I think my ever just constantly there interest in like musicals and theater and acting,
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of growth that needs to happen inside of me before I step into that, because it just seems like a very very different landscape,
Yeah, it
in
is.
such a
Oh my god,
beautiful way.
musicals? I don't know if
Yeah, that's a whole other.
I'd love
You
to, but
should. That would be fire.
I think I just still have that, like, high school fear, that trauma that my high school teacher gave me. But I'm gonna start taking singing lessons soon. I
Fire.
think that'll make me feel more comfortable because
Yeah.
even with musical theater, I feel, there's a people say proper way you're supposed to be
Yeah.
singing, and it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
make
I
it.
and I think this is like kind of the place I want to like end this conversation on. This is an amazing conversation. I think I was thinking about this getting ready for this episode about how I kind of said in the beginning, I've been so inspired by all of these things.
Mhm,
And it's funny because I've been inspired to not only write because I've seen and heard good acting and writing, but also
mhm,
to make good music because I've seen and heard good acting and writing. So it's like I get a chance to then write differently because of this. And
mhm.
I feel like the creativity is so cool because even in its like specificity, it feels like a fire that kind of just gets passed on to different people.
Mhm.
So it's like less of like a specific thing. It's more of just like it's warming everybody else up so they can leave with another fire to kind of find other things. And I think with that, it's like there is that pull of doing things the correct way,
Oh
you
God.
know, and moving in certain spaces. Um, and sometimes that means just like doing your homework and being able to credit certain sources. And I think sometimes those people who are even more traditional in the space or whatever you say, like whatever the title
Mhm.
is for them, they kind of put their own intent, like their own kind of trauma onto people because they
Oh
had to
God.
get it a different
I
way.
feel that way so much when I see those
Yeah.
letterboxed uh
Um,
people's top four, and I haven't watched certain films or have heard
yeah.
of them. And it's just like, stop putting that pressure of
Yeah.
yourself. Like, you grew up in a very black household and you were watching
Yeah.
black films, and like you can go explore that now, but you're not gonna be smited for not seeing
Right.
The Godfather, which I
Yeah.
have now.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
break
See,
up,
now you're a real
right?
filmmaker. You're a real
Yeah,
filmmaker.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, that's, I feel like it's like a very elitist,
Yeah, for sure.
you know.
Yeah. The powers at be, they're trying to continue being the powers that be.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, that kind of barrier to entry is kind of what makes them great because they have to enter certain systems in a different way.
Mhm.
And I think it's been really cool seeing you grow and nurture your craft. And I think you are, I'll tell you this offline too, like one of my favorite writers and voices, just in creativity. I'm very privileged to be able
Oh.
to know you and like learn from you and create alongside you. And yeah, thank you for coming on and having this conversation again. I don't know if you have anything else to say to the people before we stop this conversation.
To the people, I think what we were talking about earlier with that video of like, if
Yeah,
you're an artist, like that means like you have the ability to embody emotions and to never let anyone dim that light for you, because that is a hard thing to do, and not everybody has that skill. Um and so I think to stop running from your own voice is what I hope a lot of artists will take from this conversation. Stop running from your own voice and stop putting like barriers on yourself to be perfect. Like, you're not perfect and you're not supposed to be. But I
how
get it.
you
We're
just
artists. We're
how
sensitive
you
by our
just dropping all these bars at the end like that. That was crazy.
um,
That was
um,
amazing. No, thank you for being here, and I hope everybody listening enjoyed this episode. Um, if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. I have to say that now, and
yeah,
that's very
like
funny to me.
subscribe.
Like and subscribe. I'm gonna put it at the beginning too. Like and subscribe. Why aren't you there?
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Promote your,
Check out.
yeah, talk
Yeah,
your stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Check out
Yeah.
Kenny. Everything Kenny got going on. We right back at you wherever you are, whether it's day or night. Stop procrastinating. Go after your dreams. They're waiting for you. Peace.
That was a bar.